Hello, everybody, and welcome to Rocket Lasso Live, episode 14 already. Time is flying by. How is everyone doing? We've got some people over on Twitch. I forgot to start the YouTube one until a little bit late, so we got to give that one a second to pop up. Hopefully that doesn't take long. And we're going to need people to start getting some questions there in the chat so we can begin to tackle them. How is everyone doing? It's starting to get pretty toasty here in Chicago. Tomorrow we got all sorts of heat warnings, so that should be exciting. And let's see what else. Well, we did launch half res. I'll pull that up. Why not? On the computer. Yep, here is half res. Head on over to halfres.com and you can get your tickets right now. It's going to be happening September 12th. It should be fun. You can check out this video to see all the crazy shenanigans that you can get up to at the event. It should be super fun. And we got all sorts of speakers. We just announced our main stage speaker, Donnie Bauer, who does a lot of amazing work here in Chicago. He was at the Mill, and he's been at a bunch of places here in Chicago. And he's currently doing his own thing, so I'm excited. His topic is "Be Water, My Friend. The game has changed. What's your move?" So yeah, it should be cool. And we got EJ leading the creative sessions for us. And yeah, lots of good stuff. You can head on over and get tickets. And there's a discount code right now. Which is, let me look up the discount code because it's specific. It is under here, nope, events. And it is 20% off if you use half-res 2025 early bird. And I'll put that in the chat just in case anybody wants to grab their ticket. So let me swap this on back. And everybody get those questions put together. If you are putting a link to something, you're going to have to be on Twitch. Links do not work on YouTube. And if you are going to link to somebody, an artist or a studio, make sure you're calling out the specific effect that you're interested in. But more specifically, the link at least needs to lead to the artist or studio. We have to be able to give credit, or it has to be a very abstracted question. And then the link, halfres.com. Boom. And boom. Okay, let's see. Dean's got a question in there already. Any of these look good? They're all pretty similar. So let's take a peek at those. Actually, I'll click the link. Oh, okay, interesting. Let's pop this open. Desktop and camera. Okay, so this is from Yeagle. So we've got, okay, that's pretty crazy. Yeah, I have an idea of maybe how I do that, but then this one, okay, that's pretty cool and kind of trippy. It does say code art, so presumably there's some math going on in here to do this stuff, which could limit what we're doing. Oh, I like the work here. Very cool. So there are a bunch of them, and different ones. I would say that one is intriguing. That one, yeah, sort of like a gravity thing going on. A lot of these have like distortion going. If this is math art, yeah, different things are going to have different effects. Some of these, the way I might go about trying to, that's not playing any audio, is it? The way I might go about them is different than might be the reality here. There's a lot of just distortions going on. But something like that, that one in particular is very specific. And so the way we might go about faking it is very different than the original approach might have been if that was like mathematically driven. But it does seem like there's a lot of simulation type stuff going on in there. So here we are jumping into Cinema 4D 2025.3. And obviously the basis of a lot of this is going to be some like 2D splines going on. And let's tinker. Actually, the very first one I might do in a very simple way. The very first one is going to be that one that had a bunch of cubes, and they mostly look like they were getting just pulled into the center point. So I think we can actually do something similar to that, maybe using the Rocket Lasso partition. So inside the asset browser, you should already have a partition. So I can hit Shift-C, search for the word partition, and we can make a partition modifier, drop it on here. I'll hit NB so we can see it more clearly, and you can see I've got a bunch of different subdivisions going on. Keeping it simple, I can just crank up this number. We'll get a bunch of subdivisions. Now it looks pretty similar to what one of those images had. And then if we, let's see, I would maybe, we can extrude that. Is there anything I want to do besides that? Maybe not. I'll just type in the word extrude, and we grab a Mo extrude, but I don't think we need a Mo extrude, so I'll just grab one of these parametric extrudes, which is a capsule. And with that, we can extrude this up any amount we want, and now we can do this offset variation. I'll go pretty much all the way up to 100%. So now you can see instantly getting this really cool subdivided sort of world. It's just, I'm not worried about them looking hollow or not, because that's not important for this scenario. So here's the very first effect I might do, which is let's make a spherify and drop that as the third object. And as soon as I do, you can see everything's getting really all spherically kind of warped. Oh, okay, this is going to be interesting. I think that this has to come before the extrude. That does make sense if it comes before the extrude. But anyway, we can modify this, and you can see it's going to make it look like a sphere. Or in this case, because I'm doing it kind of two-dimensionally and the extrude comes after, it's kind of like cylindrical in nature. But it's like, well, this is making it mostly bulge out, but you see the outside is pulling in. So this is all based on the current radius. So if I were to drop the radius down to 0, and now we start increasing this, you're going to see it looks like everything's just getting sucked into the center point. Everything's just getting pulled inward. So essentially, we've now got like this black hole, but the black hole is being applied everywhere all the time. So essentially, we want this effect, but I don't want it applied all the time, always. But let's put that up to 100%. And now under fields, and this is where when they implemented the idea of fields, that's one of the reasons they were so powerful. Is in the past, this maybe would have had a basic fall off, but now independently, we can say, okay, here's a spherical field here, and we'll give this spherical field 100% fall off. And now you'll see that if I were to grab mostly this outer radius, I can grab this outer radius, and as I increase the radius, as it passes through this full gradient, you see these different parts are starting to get pulled towards the center. So as we continue pulling this out, you see we get this black hole effect as it goes further and further and further. And if we pull this far enough out, essentially everything will look like it gets pulled to 0. Now we could do all sorts of modifications on that, which are really nice. We can do it inside the remapping, or I can do it as a standalone in the field where we make a modifier layer. I'll make a curve. Select this, and let's remap this to be, it's going to ease in, and it's also going to ease out just to hide it. So now grabbing the same sphere, grab the radius here, and as I pull in, it's going to pull in slowly, and then when it gets to the end, it's going to kind of pull towards the center point a lot quicker and smooth it out a bit more. But honestly, now that I think about it, I might want that curve to be a little bit different. Maybe at the end, we want this to like really accelerate in. So we're kind of easing in, and then the gravity gets stronger and stronger and stronger. So it's going to seem kind of weak. But then if you watch any given point of it, it's going to get pulled in very quickly. Honestly, it's still, artistically speaking, not exactly what I'm looking for. I'm going to try pulling stuff in a little bit more quickly, perhaps. Is that what I want? Kind of this reverse S-curve? Yeah, it gets pulled in very quick, so I don't think... It definitely kind of shows off the effect, but I don't think I want quite as much of a pop in there. But I do like that kind of extreme... It looks nice in the nearer the end, but even having said that, I could keep on modifying the curve. You can see that a lot of the artistry here is going to be about how we tell this curve to be interpreted. So potentially we could get the best of both worlds where we're sort of easing in, but then we're going to accelerate up relatively quickly to that state until it kind of finishes itself off. Artistically speaking, we could, kind of fall anywhere here. That's a little bit smoother in the initial transition, and everything gets kind of pulled in. And we could also say that there is this inner amount. So we are still remapping the end result, but now anything that enters the center part of the circle is going to be at 100%, which in theory, I think we'll have pulled it down to 0. Yeah, let's say that, yeah, that would have pulled it down to 0. So as I increase this, eventually, yeah, it doesn't take long for all this stuff to get pulled fully down to 0. I think that makes sense. Yeah, the curve shape we have here, I do prefer things that transition a little bit more smoothly than that double warble there. Yeah, essentially that's the effect that I want to do. So yeah, we could keyframe that, or we could drive it. I might actually drive it in this case. Let's grab the size. I'm going to say animation. Actually, we're going to do field, say add, and we're going to say that the value is going to go from 0 all the way up to, I'm not sure how much, let's say 600. And that's going to happen over a certain length of time. I will make a rocket lasso timer. So here is a rocket timer. And I will say that that is going to go from the time of 0 to the time of 90. It's going to map it from 0 to 100. So I should be able to hit play. And now you see this animating for us. And it keeps on going. You see it doesn't go quite far enough, which is one of the reasons I like the field drivers. It's really easy to grab this and say, actually, I should go up to 1000. And even here, we can go to the very end frame. Oh, yeah, and the timer loops 1 frame early for looping purposes. So let's just increase that by an extra 1. So yeah, we can go to the very last frame here, and now we just increase the max value until we actually see the end result we want. I mean, obviously you can do this with keyframes as well, but we do something like that. Now we know it's fully encapsulating it, and now we can set the timing and remap that value really easily. So yeah, so we get this gravity effect going, which is nice. And the extrude is coming afterward. If I turn that off, you see it's just a 2-dimensional effect happening, and then this extrude's making that happen. Now, there are several additional layers that might make this look better. One being that this is not very subdivided. So if we want to keep everything parametric, we can go back to this stage, and maybe I'll make a subdivide. So here's a subdivide capsule, and now I'm just straight up subdividing everything. So you see extra segments here. This is not an intelligent subdivide. It's just kind of applying everywhere. So I could just add a few subdivisions here. At least everything's got the same number of them. But obviously a tiny one's going to look like it's got higher resolution because it's tinier. But nothing else changes, where I can just reactivate that stuff and we still extrude. We just have to make sure the extrude is set to use islands. So you see all of those are getting pulled. But now let's turn on a little bit of kind of shadowing there. And let's run it. Well, I'll just scrub. And now, yeah, now you can see how any one of them is sort of getting distorted instead of just getting pulled. And that should keep everything a little more matched up. We are getting some pops in the extrusion there, which is making me think that as these shrink down to a very, very tiny size, the index for the extrusion is getting modified. Or maybe this angle thing is like happening. Yeah, actually, I'm going to crank up that angle. I could. Okay, that was as simple as the angle. So I think certain things were getting welded together, and as everything got compressed down, they were getting welded. So yeah, we just crank that up so they're not getting welded. And now, yeah, a little bit smoother of a gravity effect pulling in. Let's see, and we could, I'm trying to think of the way I would do that. But yeah, if we made that make this inner fall off a lot larger, then now the transition's only on this outer part. So that should give us yeah, that's a very different visual. See, now the transition has to happen very quickly. Now we're always kind of cutting an object in half, but if I pull this further out, you see we get a much longer transition between the two. So yeah, it's a fairly robust rig that we can, modify to be whatever we want. What's cool is that we can we can move this around however we like. As long as the spherical field and the spherify are at the same location, I could scoot this to other locations where it's like, oh, the gravity is going to be pulling from this corner approximately. And I play, and now you can see the gravity is pulling from there. So sort of a black hole effect there. And yeah, again, let's modify this inner fall off just so you can see like a different type of effect where everything's pulled into the center a lot more quickly. Yeah, in this particular layout, I like that look even more, and everything kind of pulls in. So that is, that's a different way of doing the effect. I don't think that's necessarily what was happening in what we saw. But it's a way of emulating the effect. So yeah, I dig that one. But I would definitely like to try and tackle one of the more spliny looking ones. So let's go here. As always worth mentioning, these scene files are going to be available pretty much immediately after the live stream. Let's say black hole on Geo. These will be available immediately after the live stream for anybody supporting on the engineer tier on Patreon, which is always appreciated. let's see. Oh yeah, some of the other effects. I got to go take a peek at the Instagram. Just remind me. So another one I saw. Yeah, that one's gonna be tricky. So just get everybody on the same page. Boop. Okay, we gotta let this loop around. Not this one. Not this one. The next one I'm kind of thinking about, which will be a little bit extra fake. That's the one we just did. But you see there's additional warping, but the black hole effect was what I was going for. This one. This is the one I think I might attempt to do something on. So back to the laptop. And this one I think is going to be a little bit of like a reverse photography type of scenario. So let's see. But because the final shape is going to be very, how do we, now that I think about it. The final shape is very well defined. So let's again start out with a simple plane, no subdivisions. But this time, we're going to feed this into a Voronoi fracture. That's going to give us all these shapes. So we can make as many shapes in there as we like. Go to sources, crank it up. So we got a bunch of those. We don't need to go insane. But yeah, that seems reasonable. And then we could erase some out from the outside, but I think in the original animation, we saw that they did sort of look like they were terminating like this. So there's a good chance there was some sort of Voronoi fracture type math happening in the beginning. And now I think I need to convert this to a spline. So either, if you are following along at home and you don't have any of my plugins, you can just make this editable, select the edges, hit Shift-C, and say edge to spline. Actually, you would want to make sure you turn off your weld there. So you would feed that into a connect, turn off weld, so they're all still separate, but that just bakes it all down. And now you can select all edges, hit Shift-C, edge to, and then at the top will be edge to spline. And now I've converted this into a spline, and there's an inner and an outer of each of these, essentially. Let me just show you what I mean. If I were to select any single point, hit UW, hit a T, you can see that will shrink down, but these neighbors still have the same edge, and that's why we didn't weld it. So undoing a bunch. I'll leave this into this connect, but now we keep it parametric if I feed it into my mesh to spline. So we're saying mesh to spline, and it's currently set to edge to spline mode, so all the edges are automatically welded. We can offset if we want, but in order to just improve the visual, I'm going to go into the Voronoi fracture, and there's another reason to keep things parametric is like now I can easily make changes, like adding in a little offset fragments, so we have these gaps in between if we wanted to. So if this is the end point, yeah, that becomes the end point of where we want to go. And we're going to end up running a bunch of spline simulation on here. So let's see what we can do. I'm going to make a plane, and let's make the plane very dark. And I'll scoot it down 5. And let's see. Let's just go step by step here. Let's say simulation collider. It's a triangle mesh, although we might want to turn that into like a box, but let's not worry about that quite yet. And now let's go to simulate and do a rope simulation. And we're going to set the radius. That moved down 5. So can we do a radius of 5? Maybe. Let's just hit play and see what happens. Does it explode? It's going to have to initialize. So let's give that a second. But is it exploding? I mean, there's very few points here. Okay, it is exploding. So 2.5 is probably the answer there. So yeah, now you can see when I run, it is fine. Now in the mesh to spline, interestingly, those are being counted as these are being counted as open spline. So what I actually want to do is grab polygon mode and say increase the threshold a little bit. And now we're tracing the outline of a polygon, which should now result in an outlined spline. So now if I hit play, now you see that they're being treated as individual little outlines. Now the gap between them is not large enough that they're not immediately colliding. So again, I move that down. I just want to see how far we can move it down. So let's just decrease this radius even more to like 1. And are they still bumping into each other? No, they're not colliding with each other anymore. And let's increase the plane just so they're not drifting. Now, the plane, for now, I want everything to pretty, is that the way I want to do it? We got a bunch of options here, but I'm going to say that the friction is way down. No bounce, no friction. And now we can grab our rope and say bendiness, then I'm just going to put in like 5,000, some absurdly huge number here. And again, no friction. I want everything to smoothly slide past each other. So now if I drop these, yeah, nothing happens, which is sort of expected. And then I probably want to trap these in the box, but let's not quite worry about that yet. I will save it. This one will be 1B underscore mesh to spline as a warning to people that might not have the plugin. And this one will, I don't even know. I'll just say blobby lines. Okay, so these are going to fall. They're kind of free to move around. So we then create a simulation turbulence. And we got to keep in mind that the more turbulence we add, it's also adding in vertical turbulence. So if we move it far enough that gravity, it's not, if we move up the turbulence strong enough, so it's stronger than gravity, stuff might hop up and cross over other lines. But I think we'd have to put in a decent amount before that happens. So there's some turbulence. And now we hit play, and now you see everything is going crazy, drifting along. Okay, all well and good. Let's make some modifications. I'm making it so bendy that in theory, well, see, here's the tricky part is under mix animation. Yeah, we could follow the shape. So there's nothing, these are coming with these kind of hard edged shapes. Now we're telling it that you're allowed to be super bendy. So it's going to be like, okay, I'm allowed to be bendy, but there's also nothing telling it. There's nothing explicitly telling it to update to some other shape. But I think there's a few different things here. I think I want to subdivide this. So I'm going to add in another Rocket Lasso plugin for two different reasons. But I'm going to add in a Rocket Smooth, so different plugin, utility spline. But when I drop that in, it's going to be able to do two things for us. I'm going to double click on it, and let's drop down the iterations. You can see that we're now ingesting the spline, and we are showing, by double clicking on the icon, I'm showing where all the points actually live. So I'm going to say, reinterpret these splines. I'm going to say that don't look at the baked line. I'm going to say instead do it based on a step. So now you can see that everything's getting subdivided by, some amount. Now there is a, actually, no, that there's a setting in a different tool that we could, wait, no, is it here? Oh yeah, retain original points. Okay, it is here. If I say retain original points, you can see that it's actually going to be perfectly on the corners. I forgot we had that in here. So now it's subdivided pretty evenly. They're not technically perfectly on the step, but they're as close to that step as they can be while retaining the original points. So not lots more points here. Now, here's the point is there is nothing. Well, actually, I can just show you. If we run the simulation, and I'll keep it highlighted so we can see it. If I run the simulation, we got way more points now. And it's going to be, I think it's going to be allowed to be quite bendy. Oop, we got to move up the simulation tag to that. So if we run the simulation, you can see that with all these extra points, it's allowed to be all blobby. Okay, so that's cool. But the hard edge shapes, there's nothing telling this to try and smooth out. And I just don't think that there is anything that would tell it to do that. Now, there is a target length, which is intriguing. Let's turn off the turbulence for a moment and just play with a target length, because I'm not sure what that will do for us. Control D, animation, linear. I'm going to say that when I record keyframes, I don't want them to be smoothed out. So under our target length, with no extra forces in here, let's see what happens if we give it a few frames to initialize. Come on, little guy. Okay, there we go. We'll give it a few frames to initialize, and then we'll shrink it to 50%, just to see what happens. So we hit play. And now they fall, and now you can see each of them independently shrinking. But this is demonstrating what I was trying to talk about, which is you can see these little points on the end still want to be kind of sharp. There's nothing stopping them. They would bend if there's a motivation to, but there is currently no motivation for those to get smoothed out. So we got several things that we can do. Let's temporarily. Do I want to keep that? Well, let me show you. So what I'm thinking is if we go into our Rocket Smooth utility spline, I can now smooth out my points. So you can see I could start dragging in these iterations, and it will actually smooth it out. Now, several things need to happen. Let's go under advanced and say do not remove if 2 or 3 points. Essentially, that's going to, as these shrink, they'll disappear. Actually, no, there's also this minimum length, so let's also get rid of that. So now as I shrink them down, they'll get really, really, really tiny, but they don't disappear. So if I were, it's the first thing I'm curious about is, yeah, I guess I will temporarily turn that off. So that's not a variable. And let's just look at our smooth. And I'm going to say iterations 0. And actually, we got stiffness. So why don't we do it differently? I'm going to say that it wants to smooth out that much, 5 iterations. And then we'll just keyframe the stiffness. The stiffness is a smooth transition between those iterations. So in the beginning, we're going to be at full stiffness. And at the end, let's do 80 frames. I'll say that it's supposed to be fully rounded out. Now, if I hit play, I don't think we're going to see anything. I don't think there's going to be any motion whatsoever. Those collided technically, but besides that, you see nothing's moving, nothing's happening. But inside of the rope, there is, under mix animation, there's a setting called follow shape. But we could also do like forces with pins, etc. But I think follow shape is the one we actually want. But that might mean we actually have to change this bendiness. But let's see. I'm just going to turn that checkbox, change nothing else, and let's see if anything happens. And yeah, you now see something's happening where these are slightly drifting, but not very much. And that comes into this bendiness. So, and some of them are probably trying to shrink too much, so they're exploding. But let's grab our bendiness and drop it down to 5. And essentially, bendiness is like the structure. The less bendiness, the more that they want to retain their original shape. So it's constantly trying to obtain its original shape. But under mix animation, if you turn on follow shape, it's saying it's constantly updating what the follow shape is supposed to be. Like what it's almost acting like, well, what's the initial state? And the initial state here is that it's super sharp, but over time it morphs to being the rounded version. So it's slowly over time saying, well, try and morph to the rounded version, but it can only morph to the rounded version to the extent that this bendiness isn't super high. So let's give ourselves a few extra frames here. Let that run. And let's just see what we get. I think some of these eventually shrink small enough that they start self-intersecting and it doesn't know what to do with itself. Like that one right there. These little guys are so tiny that they're self-colliding, and now suddenly there's a bunch of energy in the scene and they're flinging around. But you see with that stiffness, all of these have now kind of organically rounded out. Now, in order to stop them from getting all the extra energy, we'd have to either lower the radius, or make the radius be smaller, but I want to keep some distance between them. Or we have to make sure that at the end state, and I might just steal that tag off for a moment so I can go here. So this is what we're shrinking down to, and a bunch of these are getting really tiny. So we've got a couple options. One would be remove anything that's really tiny. We could have it not get as smooth as I'm making it. Like we can do fewer iterations, just like round them out a little bit here. And I see those don't get, so like that one got really tiny. That one's already really tiny in the beginning. We could rearrange some of our Voronoi fracture to make sure that they're all a little bit more evenly distributed. And we don't have a tiny one. Like, even if we turn all the stuff off the original Voronoi fracture, you see there's a tiny one there. So not surprising that a tiny one is resulting in everything wanting to explode and drift away. So just keep in mind that is why those are doing that. What's cool is we keyframed the stiffness, so I can just change that iteration count, and then that's still keyframed. Oh yeah, and we also crank up our counter scale, so it's going to try and round it out, but it's going to try and maintain the original shot size a little bit more. But that particular one is still shrinking down quite a bit, just because there's so few points in the beginning. We could also put more subdivisions on there, but I'm not inclined to do that. So you know what I might do? I might bring back this minimum length, and you see that little guy is going to eventually disappear. But is it bad if the point count disappears? So if we go and do this, if that one suddenly disappears, first of all, it's kind of a pop in the animation, but it's going to freak out our overall thing. Will everything suddenly reset? It didn't disappear. So I guess it's not allowed to disappear because it's already in the simulation. Okay, good to know. Given what I just tweaked, though, well, let's get rid of that minimum because that's not doing anything. So it's dangerous to keep in there. But I think because I'm shrinking everything less, well, I guess there was a difference there because the little guy is still like freaking out. I don't know how well you can see it, but it starts spinning crazy style because once again, they're intersecting. So it's adding energy into the scene. So yeah, we got a little, what do you call it? Crossfire, the little crossfire. Don't get caught up in the crossfire there. Little spinning Beyblade there. So yeah, so now you can see we get these lovely little blobby guys. They've gotten rounded out, which is cool. And now some other things I'd like to kind of tinker with, and this actually might help with this, is let's play with that target length again, but instead of shrinking it, let's have it grow. So I'm going to say keyframe, and then let's say around the same time that they've all smoothed out, I'm going to say that you should be 200% your length. Now, 200% is a lot, but let's see what that does. So they're going to start rounding out, but at the same time, they're also inflating. So these rounded bits should round out based on the original shape, but they're also getting bigger and pushing apart from each other. So yeah, I mean, it's not exactly the effect, but it's pretty cool. I dig it. I'm now thinking we should trap it inside of a shape. So just because it would be, I think, cleaner, I'm going to put a cube in a cloner, set this to radial down to 5 with a radius, grab the cube and guess correctly. And then that's just the shape we're getting trapped in now. Shrink that down a little bit. So those just become boxed walls. And now we can put a collider onto them. I'll say that is counting as a box, and I think it'll see each one individually. So yeah, that's now a box where they'll be trapped, and they're eating up a lot of viewport. So let's say that under render display, I'll use the lines. So there we go. Less obtuse. Okay, let's grab that, and I'm going to give it a automatic color of kind of a yellow. So, or no, it's taking on the color of the spline. Colorize none. Well, to colorize as children coming in. Well, it's okay. I just want to highlight, but we can see it well enough when it's white. Okay, so now they're expanding. Now they do start passing through each other, so that's actually another tweak I wanted to make, is I do want to increase this radius. So we'll double the radius, but that probably means that we need to double our offset fragments. So let's see what that does. Cool. So they're all expanding. There's got double the radius, so they're twice as unlikely to hop on top of each other, which I still expect when they get to not enough room. But yeah, look at this really fun organic shape that we're getting. So yeah, it's pretty fun. I dig that already. Now, if we were, remember I said this is sort of a reverse photography. So now you can imagine if we took that and then we run the animation in reverse, we're going to end up back with this shape. It's going to look a little bit more controlled if we shrink our radius here and we trap everything almost right away so they can't expand beyond where they originally were. They're colliding. Let's be careful with that. Give them a little bit more room. Not much. Just enough to not be colliding. So yeah, we immediately get this really cool organic shape. Now, like I said, depending on the turbulence, which is actually the turbulence isn't on, but they're growing, they're starting to collide with each other. And you see like that one hopped, a couple of these have hopped up on top of the other ones. So we're just expanding a lot here. So I think let's go back to the keyframe here and we'll say we scale up to maybe 155. Just so they're not getting so big that there's not enough room for them to squeeze in and they're hopping on top of each other. We got a major hiccup going, maybe a crash, maybe not. I've been saving reasonably often, so hopefully we didn't lose much if it did decide to crash. It's starting to feel like a crash. I'm very happy that that we're piping one machine into a different machine. So even if Cinema crashes and it eats all the RAM or whatever happens, the stream does not crash anymore, which used to be a common thing. It was a pain to start another stream because then YouTube would start a second link and the original one wouldn't be going anymore. But I'm starting to think that one died because it's not that complicated of a scene. So let's kill it. So let's go and click on over here. Click there. End task. Okay. You never know if I've got like weird plugin stuff or stuff that I'm not supposed to show yet. No spoilers. Okay, Cinema's going to reopen. I'm going to do the click it twice because it'll gaslight you. The first time you click it after a crash, it never launches. The second time it will. I'm just checking the chat to see if anybody had any follow-ups on this. Is it Mate? Apologies if I am not pronouncing your name correctly, but thank you. Saying thanks for all-day inspiration. Okay, let's see. Cinema's still open, taking its sweet time. And yeah, Dean mentioned earlier that it would be better if it was subdivided on the previous one, and we did eventually do that. And Thurl saying love the sound effects when I was doing the black hole sound effects. And then we got a couple other questions that have popped in, but those are different topics. Cinema's almost open, initializing plugins. And there we go. We're back. Okay, let's see how much we lost. Open blobby lines. We lost a bit. Is this keyframe? Oh, we lost a decent amount, unfortunately. Okay, I'm going to speed run back to it because I still want to explore with this. I think it's a pretty cool playground. So double the range, which means we can do double the radius. And then we're going to go to follow shape. We're going to keep that minimum length thing. Let's turn that off. We're going to do 2 iterations. Keyframe at 0. Keyframe at 80. Jumping to a future time in this scenario is actually relatively dangerous because Cinema is attempting to calculate. Don't tell me that froze it. We are on this child, but no, that didn't freeze it. Okay. But I don't know why the timeline didn't jump. But it's like the simulation is trying to do stuff on it. So it's like, oh, it's trying to calculate. Yeah, even there, look, I just moved this rope simulation onto the plane, and the plane just got deformed thinking that the points were doing stuff. So, and actually it's being a little bit weird because it's not a spline object anymore. I'll put on turbulence because turbulence can't be affected. Okay, let's turn that back on again. And then we jump to a different time. And we'll keyframe that down to there. That's not actually changing the point count, so that should be fine. If we get rid of that, now it's not ever changing the point count. And we can put the simulation onto the smooth. I'm going to save it. And turbulence, we don't even need turbulence yet, so we'll turn that off. And we will, yeah, very bendy. Actually, we want less bendy. Drop that down to 5. No friction, that's fine. And oh yeah, and then the length. So the length at this time, and then again a little bit dangerous, but I'm just gonna risk it. Let's jump to a future time. It's gonna hiccup as it suddenly is like, oh, I got fast forward through the timeline. Both jumped out to 155. Okay, now all we're missing is our cube cloner, shrink, radial 5. Grab our cube. Stretch. That's fine. And then I'll just scale that until we're a little bit beyond. Right click, render, display, use lines. Okay, I think we're caught up. Okay, that's growing. And yeah, I think that they're still going to hop on top of each other. That's kind of where we were at. So they'll go, but now they're growing and they're smoothing. And I forgot to put the collider tag on those. Important. Brunk. Save again. So drifting around, those look like they were immediately colliding a little bit. Now they are growing. There's no turbulence. It's just them growing into each other. They don't have enough space. At the same time, they're smoothing out. Those sharp edges are, oh, I think we've crashed again. I don't think anything we're doing here should be causing a crash. That's upsetting. I mean, it's mostly upsetting because how long the cinema took to reload. Well, let's give it a second. I'm not 100% sure it crashed, but that's very similar time to what it did before. Yeah, I'm not cool. I'm not sure what's doing it. I mean, we are using a Rocket Lasso plugin, so we could disable that and just let it grow, and that's eliminating a variable. But all the points and everything I'm feeding in there should be stable. I think Cinema made me click on it 3 times that time. But I'm on to its tricks. No, it's super. Oh, I don't know why it opened super fast that time. I'm not complaining. But that time I was constantly saving. Okay, so we could yank this out, and if we want to give it subdivisions, I could change this to enable a linear spline set to subdivided with a length of 5. It's not super precise, and I don't have feedback on what it's doing, but that should be kind of doing what Smooth was doing. Not quite as well, but kind of. So we hit play, and you know, everything else should be set. It's taking a long time to initialize. I'm not sure why. Okay, it did go. Seems slower, even though it's like the same settings. But now, there, just so you know, there is nothing trying to smooth out those little sharp corners. So it got all the way through. So, you know, maybe there's some like funky hierarchy things going on there. I'm not sure why. But yeah, now these will grow. They're they're pretty free. They're, the bendiness is 5. We could lower that down. So we can put that down to 1. And now they're trying pretty hard to maintain their shape, but there just isn't enough room for them to do it. So they will just be sliding along. Now, I do still fully expect, like that one has escaped. So that one has hopped up. Those are hopping out because there just isn't quite enough room for how bendy they are and them filling up the space. Now, it's not necessarily very hard to stop that from happening, although, you never quite know. But if that's not falling too far down, and if we move a second one up to block, I think we just want to make sure it's not falling very far. And let's copy our tag to be on the other one. So it's there, but we're not seeing it. It's got the same collision. Actually, it might not be the same collision because it's set to front only. So I'm going to say both. So it collides both sides. So anyway, now we're in theory trapping it between these two, but I don't know. Maybe we could squish it down more because maybe, I think it did hop. So I think there's enough room. And actually now, given the setup, we should be able to see that, in theory, I could move this way further down, something like that. And now we reset. And you see it's up in the air a little bit. That's probably fine. I'll just shove it down immediately. Let's hit play here and see if... Oh, it didn't immediately fall. So I think we want to be very careful and center that. It's got a little bit of margin, but okay, it does enough for it to not explode. And now, in theory, we've got trapped in between two. Honestly, it'd probably be better to not even use a plane, but to like put some more box calculations on there. But I imagine this will do a pretty good job of stopping them from being able to climb on top of each other. So that is doing a fine job. Now we could just play around. We got a sandbox going here, which is cool. Let's save it again. And we do things like say, hey, you are very bendy. So they're free to like twist around. And now you can see they're not fighting each other. They're not trying to inflate to their full shape. So they're free to just be like these little wet noodles. I do want to keep some structure. So I'll say like, I don't know, 15. Even 15 drops it down. It's a fairly sensitive number here. So I can say, okay, 10 feels good where there's a little bit of structure, but they feel free to bend. Now we could turn on our turbulence again. Now the turbulence apparently is quite strong, but you can see we're doing a good job of trapping them in between because that looks pretty cool. I'm going to lower the strength of that significantly down and increase our scale. So now they're all free to drift around, but they're doing this great job of colliding, creating these little blobbing effects after the fact. Now something, I know that the combination wasn't super happy before, but if we feed this into... If we let the simulation happen on that earlier thing and then put this into a smooth after the fact, that's supposed to work. You can see I'm now smoothing out the end result. And in this case, I don't think I have to, I'm not going to resample. So we're just using the original shape. And we can just put like a little bit of smoothing, even just one to round out those corners. And that all runs after the rope simulation has been running. So why is that not updating? Did they change something? Because smooth definitively used to work on something else. Because I was always giving demos where you could like run a low point rope simulation, and you could run a low point rope simulation and then subdivide and smooth it with the utility splines. Maybe that simulation just doesn't like propagating up through. I just put into a connect object and suddenly it does seem to be working. So, when in doubt. Brighten that up. Nope, still wants to be dark. We're ingesting. Wait, we must be overriding it with our custom color. We could randomly assign a color. So now we get these drifting around. Let's hide this upper one just so we don't see that grid. So we get this lovely blob of them going around. And I've done these types of playgrounds before, even with the old simulation system. And it is really fun just to tinker with them and get different effects going. I've even done it where I built behaviors into individual blobs that they're trying to travel around. These all just blob around. But if we were to grab this and start decreasing our bendiness, they're going to try and reinflate and try and maintain their shape a little bit more. If I drop this down to 1, suddenly you see these are trying to have some volume, but they're too big, so they're scaling up, and which means they're getting compressed. Right now, we just got this random turbulence going, and we could do all sorts of things. We could drop the scale down further, so there's a little bit more random motion going. Yeah, you definitely see some randomness. When it's larger, there's more like the wind's blowing over to the left, the wind's blowing over to the right. So you see them kind of moving around a little bit more as a one giant mass instead of individually. But we could turn that off and do other forces, ones I don't use very often, something like a rotate. Rotate, I tend not to like the way rotate looks. But if we make a rotate, let's see how it works here. I'm going to spin it up because I think it spins around Z. And let's see what that does by itself. So now there's a force saying to spin, and I'm going to crank it up. Okay, so it is working. If we crank it up a lot, you see the whole thing spinning. So I'm going to lower it down. Oh, it's interesting because I drop it down to 55 and you see it almost completely stops. So it's like we need a decent amount of force for it to do anything. But then can we go into our field and make a spherical fall off? And increase that. And decrease that. So now there's a lot of rotational energy, but only in the center. And as it goes further out, there's less and less of it. And I just want to see what that sort of does. Now, because it's so far in the center, I'm going to increase it up. Yeah, kind of a blender effect. Just do the center there. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of cool. I'm trying to think of other things I would put, I would want to do here. We've got options. I mean, what's cool in theory, I don't know, but this is just geometry that we could do additional things with. So we can do things like extrude. So I can extrude all those, and immediately it's like, ooh, that looks cool. So get that extrusion going. And now we've got these dimensional blobs doing their thing, and immediately a pretty cool effect. And you can even imagine that it's like, if we did, actually, let's do it, because why not? Rewind, save. So we've got this kind of organic shape going here, very cellular pattern. Let's do a viewport renderer, all frames. Just, I'm going to lock the ratio, divide by 2, just because if you eat up all your RAM, then it won't play back in real time anymore. I'm not worried about saving. Viewport renderer, copy effects from viewport, filter, load preset, crisp preset. And that should have it be the view. Now that viewport render should look very much like my viewport here. Except the HUD's on, but that's fine. Initializing, and then it should go pretty quick. Yep. So yeah, immediately we're breaking away from that cellular pattern. But coherent, nothing's overlapping, everything's traveling around. Pretty cool swirl going on here. We could even have that swirl be drifting around from one place to another. That could be cool. But immediately it's like, oh, if we started out the animation here and then we ran it in reverse, eventually this would get to, like perfect cellular patterns. So it's kind of like, oh, that's how it magically got there. So that's what I meant when I said it would be kind of reverse photography. But let's start at the beginning, just run it forward. And yeah, pretty cool effect. I dig it. Yeah, the blobbing effect here is pretty cool. There's additional ways to go about doing a blobbing effect. We could have done it with a bunch of like inflated orbs and use slicer to slice through them and get a cross section of them. We could make all sorts of geometry from what we're seeing here. But I think it works pretty well. And I mean, there's so many different settings. Like we're not using any stickiness here, but like these could be kind of sticky on each other. We could add friction in so that they're less likely to just smoothly slide past each other. I mean, just as a singular setting. Let's see what that does by adding in some friction. Now the ground, we already know we made the ground not have any friction. I'm going to put a lot of friction. So now these should, in theory, have friction with each other. So these ones in the middle that are trying to rotate are going to be kind of stuck on these outer ones. So my hope would be like this blob here, it's going to kind of drag these other ones along for the ride and maybe sort of twist. Hit NB so we can see the polygons a little bit. And yeah, right there you can see that those are not sliding past. Instead, it's pulling it. So now everything, there's actually a lot more of a swirling effect going on because everything is getting pulled along for the ride. But now that everything's getting pulled along for the ride, the rotation just isn't enough to overcome it. So I'm going to make that stronger. Come on, twist it. Even that, I imagine it's going to start dragging it down. But yeah, this swirling effect is looking pretty cool. Keep on increasing the power. swirl. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's distinctly a very swirly looking thing. Yeah, look at that. That's pretty cool. I think there's these outer blocks still have friction as well. Those might, you see, they're kind of like, it feels like it's like rubbing up against like glass. So if I were to grab those, oh no, those have zero friction, so they're free to move. But let's say we did give them friction. Those, yeah, suddenly those don't want to move at all. So now there is this kind of push and pull. So I do wonder, yeah, you see like that one right there? It just got, watch that one maybe, that they're getting rotated around. Like when something's on the outside, it's getting stuck. So things are actually being forced to kind of rotate around. Interesting. But yeah, I mean, it's a playground. It's a playground. You can do lots of different effects, do all sorts of different forces, have stuff, gravity pull one way or pull the other way. Like those are all swirling around, but we could, let's say we're viewing it like that, as if gravity's pulling on everything. So we can make a force wind, and the wind is currently blowing that way. That's fine. So now everything's going to want to push that way. I'm going to give it a little more power. Let's see if in general, how much power do I have to give that? Yeah, okay, now I'm starting to feel like those are, these are now pooling down on this side, and everything's going to get swirled around. The ones on top are the only ones free to like reblob back out again. Everything else is getting stretched, and we can put as much, gravity here as we want, where everything's pulled down. The rotation's really starting to fight, but yeah, even just these blobbing down, pretty cool. Anyway, is there any more exploration here? I figure I'll move on to another question instead of tackling more, because we did a decent job of 2 of them, even if the effect is probably different than the original creation. Make that a little bit stronger. Really spin those. At some point we could break them, but it's being surprisingly robust right now. Let's get rid of the gravity on that one. So everything's a little more free to, see those get tugged along the ground now when it can manage it. I do like these being flung around. Like, it's a pretty cool effect. And then keep in mind all the different cool ways that this could be, like, this is just kind of cool abstract motion graphics, which is neat. But the amount that you could be art directing a logo or something into this, I'm going to save that, but let's save it as another version. And let's see, how do I want to do it? Is that a good idea? Maybe. Let's see. I want to keep my Voronoi fracture. We're going to get rid of a bunch of stuff just to see it. So there's a Voronoi fracture. And let's go into our sources and temporarily turn that one off. And then I'll make a text spline. I would, if we could make a, I always wish there was a way of converting fonts into like a one-dimensional shape. Or right now, I've flipped everything around upside down. So let's keep our sanity, flip that around, and I'll grab our gravity. Actually, we'll have gravity be up. Gravity will go up. So RKT. We just have to draw out a line. RKT. But anyway, I'm saying, a single line through the center point of all of those would be really cool. But that's a non-trivial thing. Okay, so then I'm going to make a matrix object. We're going to clone the matrix onto an object, and the object is going to be the text spline. So we get those. We'll say it's an even distribution. Or I can even say step, which is going to be even better. Drop that down to 15. That's a lot. 55? No. 25. Yeah, maybe 25. So anyway, there's an implied shape now. So if we go into a Voronoi fracture, now I can feed the matrix object in. So now it's getting fractured, showing that shape. These would be very strange looking blobs. Let's tinker. Let's try 15 again. Yeah, so it subdivides more. We get that type of shape. We could put the random one back in again if we were to visually hide those and the spline. This is the shape that we're getting, where it's like, oh, maybe the text is kind of implied. Maybe we do. This isn't the best example because we could just put the spline in there directly and break this apart in many other ways. But anyway, you can see that using the rig as we have it, we've kind of made this different, interesting shape. Now we convert it to a spline. Now we connect it. Now we smooth it. Then we extrude it. Everything else should work. So now we just let it do its thing. Blob. And yeah, now you would run that in reverse. And then keep in mind, when you're doing the reverse, you might want to do things like really slowly ease in, because when you reverse it, that'll be a very slow ease out. But yeah, obviously this is throwing it in the blender right away. So, nothing left of the text. Yeah, I'm trying to think of other things. I mean, there's all sorts of things we could do potentially to under like our mix animation. We could be putting influence maps on there, which I'm not even sure if those work on a spline, but we could put a spline so it's like where the text is that would really want to stay where we told it to, but the outer parts wouldn't want to stay, so it'd be free to kind of swirl around. Lots of different things, but I'm impressed at how robust the simulation is. That it's running pretty well with all these different lines. But I've always loved the new rope simulation. It just works really, really well. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So unless there's any other specific follow-ups to this, I think we'll move on to another question. Um, let's see. Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Well, Flavio was just saying it'd be cool to try this with some text splines too. And yeah, that totally works. So this one didn't go too far, but right now we're doing all this just to make a fancy spline. But I could just say drop the text in there directly. Yeah, grab this text and say you are going to be you're going to be the object, and we want to subdivide it. So we'll drop that on. Like I am inclined to put that into a utility resample. So now we are resampling the spine. So it's got these extra segments. Let's grab our font and change it to lemon milk. Lemon. Hey, come on, font filter. Oh, there it is. So do something like that. It looks like this font wants to flip. This is where I hate direction auto. So I'm going to say direction Y. That way it's always like, oh, I'm supposed to go up on Y. Anyway, this is just that text. And I'll run the simulation on the resampled one, but not on the smooth. The smooth is rounding it out after the fact. It's updating the shape, but that's actually not necessary. I'll turn that off. Unnecessary calculation. It's still going to get bigger, which is, it doesn't have to, but it is going to. And the bendiness, I'm going to say 0. So it's going to try harder to keep the shape of the spline. And I'll turn off the wind. Actually, we'll turn off the rotation just for a moment, and we'll just see what happens. I'll play, and I think nothing should happen. Yeah, nothing happens, but then we can turn on some turbulence, and that probably needs to be in the connect again. Connect. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to connect, and now you see these fun blobs happening, and they got bigger. It was the inflation, the length increasing, which is what caused them to do that. And there's still that swirl, trying to swirl them around. But yeah, fun little blobs. Now that blob is trapped inside the other blob, so they do still get extruded correctly. So that's kind of fun and funky. We can add some bendiness in here, so now they're going to be very free to just squish around and do their thing. Squish. And then we can reactivate things like our rotation, which, oh, that looks cool. Look at that. Wow, look at that. All right, well, we got to run that in reverse because that looks really cool. Like I said, let's do that thing I was saying, which is ramping these up slowly. So I will do another field driver, max on field driver, and that's going to go from 0 up to 700. But it's going to happen over a length of time. The time is going to be from my rocket timer. It's looping. I'll just say do it once, and it's going to take 90 frames. And we really want to ease in. We got these lovely presets. So we're going to ease into the swirl over 90 frames. We can even do this ease in, ease out if we want to. Slowly ease in, and the power will slowly decelerate. So I'm not sure which will look better. So that is rotation. I might put this on the turbulence as well, which is set up to 12. So I'll drag this over, and I'll say override the tag with the strength. And now we have to say that's going from 0 to 12. We'll see increase up to 15. So now, in theory, the forces are starting out very weak. So you see in the beginning, not much is happening. And as we continue, they're still growing. So keep that in mind. But as we slowly ramp into the turbulence and slowly ramp into the rotation, these are getting free to start swirling around, which immediately worked pretty well. I'm pleased with it. So let's send that to the picture viewer. Let it initialize, and then just see how it looks in reverse. If you were doing a logo animation for somebody. And right now we're doing a swirl, but you could have them slowly drift up, or look like a plinko machine where they're blobbing their way down, and or poking them with a stick. You can imagine running. This is supposed to be like a ripple in the water, and you have a stick pass through them. Now I wouldn't actually collide them with a stick, although you could poke them with a stick. But if you just made a stick and then you put a really strong negative attraction on it, you could pass it through like you're passing through water, and then there would be like the effect as if the stick hit it, but it wouldn't actually be a collision. And I've often done that for client projects, where I need an effect to happen. You can't do a real collision, but you can apply a force at that point. So anyway, I don't think we need to go super far. And then we just ease right on into the logo. So yeah, we had to do it in reverse. And then we had to ease in so that now we ease out. But now we get this really nice logo reveal. So yeah, always the chaos emerging out from order, which is cool. And then just out of curiosity, yes, we just did that. But there's also our forces and our pins. Pins are a little bit more direct. Let's try it with forces. Now we are putting heavy forces in there. But I'm going to just let it run. So we're going to start out with not much. Yeah, I'm just going to let it power through. Look at the wiggles we get from the increased length going. That's kind of funny. So the swirls starting to go. Oh yeah. Oh, I still got this force on there. That's why it looks so different. A little force goes a long way, apparently. So yeah, these would be all swirling around. But now, if I were to keyframe force and let this go forward, we already saw it looked like it had a pretty strong effect. So over the course of some frames, let's put that up to 2, which is not much. I thought we were going to have to go much higher values. Right now it's going to be pretty harsh, but let's hit play and just see what happens. Now there's a force telling it to try and return to where they originally were. Now they had to fight not only through each other, but themselves, because it's like maybe a point there wants to get down here, but this point wants to go up there, and they're just fighting and they're squishing. So you see it's actually not able. This is not able to get into its final position. The R got close. So yeah, it's kind of funny, but yeah, I think these being relatively strong is actually preventing them from getting where they want. I bet you if we weakened it, there's more of a chance that the swirl or something would let them through. And then they're going to try and lock in. If we fade into that more slowly, it might be closer to like one of those letters being able to make their shape. Maybe not. Hard to tell. But yeah, they're these forces are counteracting. So yeah, that's why we reversed it. Because if I try and say set it, it's like, well, it's in such a weird condition that it doesn't know how to get back to where it's supposed to be. But yeah, I think a pretty cool experiment there. I'm going to delete out. All right, let's just turn that off because that was interesting, but not. Well, it was a good proof of what was going on. So I'll give that a save. Yeah, Dean, you could totally put a character in there as well. You could even say everything. You'd say that the ropes had a lot of mass and then turn all the forces off from the ragdoll. So the ragdoll would only be getting hit by the blobs, and that's what would be smacking them around instead of the blob itself being pushed around by, say, the wind and the rotation. Thanks for the question, Dean. That was a good one. Pete on YouTube. I've been trying to simulate a stack of paper on a desk getting kicked off by a guy sliding along the desk. It gets very unrealistic very quickly. A stack of paper on a desk gets kicked off by a guy sliding along the desk. That bit of the sentence confuses me, but let's just assume that we've got a giant pile of papers and they're getting smacked. I'm just going to probably use a sphere and just smack the pile of papers with a sphere. Now that could be the leg of a character, just as well as a more simple shape. And you're saying the main problem here is that it's getting very unrealistic very quickly. So let's keep that variable in mind because maybe that'll be relevant. Now, maybe this is a dumb idea, but I'm going to try and do this real world scale. So we're just going to approximate a couple of shapes here. In fact, why don't we make a box? I'm going to make an axis. This is geometry axis. Drop it as a child. And now I can scale down this to be a desk. Like so. Give them a bigger desk. Okay, so there's our desk. It's a block that's going to give us much better collisions, in theory. So I'll say that both of these things will be simulation colliders. And then we need a stack of paper. We had decent luck with paper last week. So let's see if we can have that hold true. Let's see, let's do a 8.5 inch by 11 inch, which is standard paper in the US. And we'll make a cloner and we'll make it linear. It's going up. And each one, I'll say it goes up 0.2. And we'll start with a stack of 50. And we'll see how tall the desk is, which is 67. So we'll move this up to 68. So there's a stack of papers. Obviously, we're starting relatively small, but let's keep things clean. And I would prefer that these are sort of very even looking. We don't have to be precise, but them being a little more square than rectangle is going to make the behavior be a little bit more consistent. Okay, a couple different things we need to test here. First of all, we save it. No, let's not say sweep. Paper. I'm just going to say paper explode. Sort of what we're going for. Okay, so those are colliders. The stack of paper is now going to become a simulation cloth. It's going to be very thin. We're going to say 0.2 or 0.1. Honestly, we just have to run the simulation and see if it doesn't mind it. Let's turn on a little SSAO so we can see some implied shadow. And let's start by just seeing if these can successfully fall. Save. Run. Okay, those fell, and they are collapsing quite thin. In fact, they could be escaping through, or they might be all overlapping on top of each other. Nope, they got shoved through the desk. Let's grab the desk and say you are a box shape to start out with. The paper is currently colliding on both sides, which is good. That is what we want. Run that again. Okay, it's getting slow, but you can see that I don't think they're escaping through, but they are, like, just the weight of each layer is, well, it is pushing through a little bit, but you can see it's resisting. Yeah, you can see it's trying to push back. So each layer is pushing down, and the weight of each layer is collapsing the layer below it further. Can we modify that by making the mass a lot smaller? Maybe. They have no thickness. But yeah, that doesn't look like 1/10 the mass doesn't look any different. 0.001. Yeah, I don't think changing the mass does anything because I think the mass is also, it's like this mass is multiplied both by how much it's pushing down, but also how much it's resisting being pushed down. So that just cancels itself out. Now, I did say the cloner, yeah, they're 0.2 apart, and we're saying they're 0.2 thickness. So in theory, that's how far they're pushing apart. Let's also put some, maybe not damping, although damping is not a bad idea. We put some damping on there. But more so, we're going to go to forces, and we can add in a bunch of drag and lift, which I think a little bit goes a long way. But I'm going to do 25, which I think is too much. But and then it looks like double-sided isn't a setting in this. So and just for maybe a sanity check, let's say 0.5. So these are all stacked up here. And we're going to hit play, just see what happens now that they've got some, a little bit of drag and a little bit of, yeah, not much better. Let's do a couple little things. I'm also going to put a random effector, 0, 1, 1. Just a little offset on there. Little bit of rotation. That's fine. Just want to see, if that is much different. I mean, actually, it is doing a slightly better job. So that's a better stack immediately. Very wobbly, but you'd want that to settle down. Now, was I bendiness? Maybe yes, maybe no. Damping, but when I said that 25 was not going to be very much, those felt like they're falling pretty quick, right? Am I doing something wrong? I feel like these are very large numbers, and I would think that we'd be seeing these want to drift down more slowly, but those are whipping their way down. I don't know how to do that any differently than I've done it. There's no other setting that would do anything. Is it somehow just not working? Now, man, velocity damping, global damping, collision passes. But it's not like we have to turn on a special setting for lift and drag. Like, that's just unto itself. Okay, now, next step, let's play with some simulation substeps and or iterations. So here's just some iteration substeps. And for the most part, what I'm looking for is this stack collapsing less in on itself? So at a glance, it feels like the stack is a bit taller. Hard to tell. Yeah, actually, yeah, definitively, because as soon as I turn it off, it suddenly collapsed. Now you see when I turn it on, it pushes back up again. So we can increase this to whatever amount, and you can see it's doing in theory, it's collapsing a lot less, and the stack is taller, like respecting the 0.2 thickness I gave it, like in theory. Let's drop that down. Let's do 100 sheets, so it's a significant stack of paper. Now, one of the tricks is like in theory, gravity is gravity no matter what scale we're at. So we're in real world scale, but it feels like gravity's really strong. But I might grab the scene scale and shrink it down. But will that do anything? I don't know. Let that run. Stack of paper. Boing. Come on. Yeah, we're throwing a lot at that. There's a lot of forces pushing down. There's actually just a paper that came out talking about like stacked papers or stacked simulations, like creating too much friction on top of each other. Yeah. See, what I'm inclined to do here, which is starting to fake things, but it'd be like to weaken the gravity. And that scene scale, I didn't see a difference. Honestly, I almost never feel a difference with scene scale. So we got lesser gravity. You see the stack is a lot calmer. It's not shoving its way through. So it goes to all things being equal. I might just lower the gravity so that the simulation doesn't have to work so hard. So we can figure out the bends and whatnot. But yeah, anyway, we got a lovely stack of paper there. I'm going to call that tall enough. It's running reasonably well. We shall save it. Let's grab random. Actually, no, I will. It's hiccuping. Oh, that's going to suck if it crashed while I was saving. Huh. Why is cinema being so buggy on us today? Yeah, I mean, there's not much going on here, so if it doesn't wake up quickly, I don't think it's going to wake up at all. You should just keep the task manager open for how often we're crashing today. Second click. There it is. 2 clicks to make it open. Where's my water? Okay, open again. Open this. Okay, well, it didn't crash. Or, I mean, it didn't corrupt the file, which is good. Oh, wait. What's going on? Okay, I just rewound. That was weird. It was like super hiccuping. I'm going to save again. It kind of seems like it did save and then crash immediately after the save, so it's still in that 60 frame state. What's the last thing we did? Control D, simulation, scene. Yeah, I had already saved after we did gravity. That's like the last thing we did, so I caught it. I saved it right before we lost nothing. Anyway, what I was going to do was add a plane effector, turn off plane. It's got color on, and now we can make a random field and do color. It's just so we can get some different colors on the paper. And I'll turn on randomized sample positions, and now we got random colors on them, so we can tell them apart. So hit play. Our stack falls. We got less gravity, so they'll more gently stack on top of each other. We could even crank gravity back up again, like if there's a relevant moment. But now what we're going to try and do is crash through it with a sphere. I'm not confident that this is going to work because the stack is in such a way that maybe it just won't. I'm just going to kind of crash through it like this. I might have the sphere be down halfway through the desk. So essentially it's either pushing straight over and up, or if we pull it down like this, it's kind of getting pinched, and I don't want to pinch it. Anyway, I feel like there's a decent chance that this doesn't work, but let's find out. Sphere. Let's just copy over. Oops. What did I do? Don't do that. Copy that up here. And we'll say that is a sphere, which should be a super accurate calculation. And we shall keyframe, Control D, animation, linear, keyframe, and I'm scared to jump into future time, so I'm just going to let it simulate there, or I could turn off the cloner. Let's do that. Turn off. So now I can jump to, we want to hit it relatively quickly, so I'm going to give it 40 frames to settle, and then 20 frames, and we're going to go boom, straight through. Keyframe. Okay. Reactivate, save, zoom on up, and let's see what happens. We do have extra simulation steps going. Timed that pretty well. Crash, super lagging, but you know, there's a lot of crazy intersections going on there. Crashes through. Some might have gotten inside. They seem to have gotten smashed into each other. Yeah, I mean, the sphere is moving at a certain speed, so it's smacking it hard, so fast that the simulation can't keep up, and everything got shoved into each other, so we end up with this crazy spiral. It didn't crash or like super hiccup, so that's impressive. Now, really, this does go to, we're asking a lot of the system to say we're crashing through something complex, like all these stacks on top of each other. We're crashing through something complex quickly. So at this point, it does go to, it is 100% reasonable that we need like extra sub steps here. So we're doing more iterations on the simulation, and maybe we could just get away with cranking that up. Like, let's jump that up to 10. And I expect this to take longer, but the stack should stack nicer. And then if that doesn't work, then we're going to start cranking up our sub steps just to, you know, at that point, the simulation's almost seeing everything travel slower. So, you know, a lot's going on there. This is 100 sheets of paper all like crashing through each other. I'm seeing some intersection there. Is it enough? I mean, honestly, it looks nearly identical. Yeah, those all get smashed in. I mean, it's automatically turning into a binder, which is interesting. Okay, so let's go back to only like 2 iterations. And now let's say we're doing 100 frame substeps instead of 20. So that's still running reasonably well in spite of all the extra substeps. It should also do a better job of them stacking. Essentially, extra substeps makes everything act stiffer. And now we crash that through. That already looks better. Yeah, look at that. Way better. Just increasing the substeps has dramatically increased it. Now these look like they still got welded in, but keep in mind those were all lower down and they were being held down by more weight from the top. These top ones have done a better job of flinging upward. They're still intersecting, but that ran relatively well, and that was just us increasing substeps. So let's double it again and see how that handles it. Oh, that's interesting. What's going on here? Why is only... all I did was increase the substeps, but suddenly only some of the papers are falling. Oh, dear. That's weird. Yeah. I'm just going to change the number and see if something changes. Nope. Let's try putting more space between them. What's going on? That just feels like a straight up bug, right? What else could that be? We're just changing that number. Let's try 155. Same stack. 20 back to normal. Yeah, that's weird. Let's try 111, just barely above the other number. Everything seemingly falls. 144. Long think, and only some fall. What is that? I don't know. I think that kind of means we can't go much beyond 100, We could increase our iterations here, so let's try that. I wouldn't be surprised if those two numbers multiply on top of each other in some way. That stops us, though. Put that back down to 1 because we don't have enough time for the pile to fall. Come on, everything fall. Okay, everything is falling. So we've got extra sub-steps, and we got extra iterations. That's the major change here. Definitely slower, but now we are doing a lot of calculations. I don't know for sure, but it could very well be that we're doing 111 times 15 as far as the collisions are specifically concerned. So we got to get all the way to 40 before the sphere starts moving. Yeah, Dean's saying something about the collision passes, and that potentially that is a an alternative to the steps and iterations. To tell you the truth, I've never been 100% clear on like the difference between iterations, smoothing iterations, and collision passes. We could try that one as well. That immediately started pushing through, which is not a good sign. I like them getting flung up. Like that's better than some of the earlier stuff we were seeing. But they're quite passed through each other. I mean, again, it seems better, but not perfect. Let's do Dean's suggestion. Let's get rid of all those iteration passes. Drop this back down to 100. Actually, just for clarity, why don't we just try increasing the passes by themselves? So let's set that to 10. Well, let's get baseline. So everybody's on the same page. These are all defaults now. Should run relatively quick. Reasonable stack, smack. It's super passing through the sphere, super getting intersections on each other. Now let's jump this up to be 10 times the amount of collision passes. Just see if we get a vibe for how it's different. Stack. I mean, the paper stacking is wonderful. Passing through the sphere less, but very much through the sphere and quite the explosion. That's... Maybe they feel a little bit less stuck together. Maybe a little bit. But let's do a combination of the two, which might be quite slow, but 120. And let's just see what that gives us. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't work. But I kind of I had a theory that this entire thing wouldn't work. And we're going to try an alternative, which is the force fake, which I was just talking about in the previous question. I think I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. I almost missed it. That one's barely passing through the sphere, so better already. I don't see a ton of intersection there. I mean, every time we crank up these numbers, it's better. In order to get this fully working, I imagine we'd have to have some pretty big numbers. And then would it even be possible still? Maybe not. I don't know. But let's try this alternative method. And I'm going to leave our substeps still really high up. But I'm going to delete, for now, that collision off of the sphere. And this might not work. But let's make I guess we can do it with an attractor. Yeah, we can do it with an attractor to keep it simple. Drop that on the sphere. And zero it out. Boop, boop. So that's exactly there. And then we have a speed limit, actually, which is pretty handy. We're going to lower the speed quite a bit. And right now it's inverse square distance, which maybe that's good, maybe it's not. But I'm inclined to just put that onto a constant. And we're going to put the strength pretty high at 100, which might not be that high. And then I'm going to make a spherical field and shrink the sphere down. And I'm going to actually make it a decent bit bigger with virtually no fall off, decent bit bigger than our sphere, just so that we can see it. Essentially, I want to see it happen beforehand. But here's the idea. We've got an attractor and it's attracting. I'm going to set that to negative attraction. We are not colliding with the sphere at all, but we do have a force that's going to act upon it. And I've just had better luck with this type of thing in general. We might not want constant. We might need a higher speed limit. And I'm pretty sure we're going to need a much stronger strength. But let's just see what this does out of the box. The movement's still going to come from the sphere. So it just passed through as if nothing happened. So we're going to dramatically increase our strength here. Okay, it reacted. So okay, you saw a little bit of a reaction there, and you look how nicely that pile kind of like boodaloop, boodaloop. So when something's working, we do times 10. So now we're doing negative 10,000 constant. And now let's see what happens. Smack, and look at that. Like maybe not perfect, but these are forces getting applied. And look at, I mean, right now I'm not seeing any intersection. I wouldn't be surprised if there is some intersection here somewhere, but I'm not seeing any intersection. So we just did it with a force instead. And let's see what we got here. Whee! I mean, they're all just kind of flying. Again, the drag. Why? What's going on with this drag? We have some damping on there, but okay, well, suddenly woke up. And okay, so now right there, see that? There's some drag, although they look like they intersected with each other. But like, why are these acting like there's no drag on them? Actually, that just looks like I got stuck in space. Go figure on that. But why is it acting as if there's none of this? And I just remember from the old simulation system, and I've done it a little bit with the new, and I imagine they're doing the same math, that like a little bit, like 10% goes a long way. Where I imagine what I was expecting these papers to do is get smacked and then immediately start like twisting and turning, but they're being flung like we're smacking a pile of like boxes, full boxes. It's flying away like a bunch of sheets of wood, not paper. But anyway, we did not, well, we're still at 100 sub steps, but you can see that we're doing a much better job of those getting flung away. And what's cool is that we actually can art direct this a lot more. So who asked a question? Pete asked a question. Right now, like we're smacking it's like we're smacking it by hitting it with the same type of shape, but we could be smacking this with a cylindrical shape. But in addition to that, I could say, well, art directing it, I want the papers to go flying upward a lot more. And that's why I love building rigs like this, is because now we can make a wind. I'm going to aim the wind upward. And it doesn't have to be. I'm going to make a child of the sphere as well. Zero out the position. So now we got a wind that in theory is blowing upward, and I'll make it quite strong. 500 might be too much. And then we'll give it that same field fall off with the sphere. So now something's going to get pushed away from this, but there's also, at the exact same time it's getting this extra upward force applied. As soon as it gets out of that fall off, that force is no longer applied. But the hope here is that we're going to get more of a flinging them all upward look. And if you're just smacking it with like a regular object, you wouldn't get those types of options. Hard to tell, I mean, because we're using all sorts of crazy orders of magnitude, but those are, it feels like they're more up. Some of those bits are so strange. And then we get these clusters going. Then we got this one. Yeah, that's probably, again, intersecting. Whenever things get stuck inside each other, that's when they're going to fly away. Or apparently get stuck in the middle of nowhere. But it's much better than we had. Was the collision passes doing a better job for us? The iteration, actually, remember the iteration definitely did something. So I'm going to turn on maybe 3 steps of iteration just to see if that improves things a little bit. Honestly, just for iteration, like we can crank this back up again. I'm going to make half the number of papers, and then we can put it back up again once we've got better results. The wind seemed relatively weak, so I'm going to put an extra 1 on there, make triple the power. Well, honestly, it's probably similar to this, so that's minus 10,000. So we also might want this to be like 10,000 if those numbers correlate with each other. We've got extra passes, but less paper. Might be able to put less separation there, just so that goes faster. I mean, anything you do to speed up your iteration process is a good idea. Okay, definitely you can feel the upward, like, anyway, now you see that we both have them getting flung away, but also getting flung up into the air. It's kind of cool the way that they're all spiraling there. That doesn't seem wrong inherently. But the part that feels wrong is that the inexplicable force is not getting applied. That feels wrong. Yeah, what is up with that? I'm trying to think of anything that could account for that, but it just seems straight up wrong. Closing side on both. Quads, double, that's fine. Target length, mass, bendiness. We could tell them to bend more, but that's, I don't think that none of that has anything to do with forces. Like seriously. Well, let's just do a quick proof of concept here. Copy, new. Actually, let's save this one. It's not horrible. Paste. Okay, so there is a sheet of paper. Here's another sheet of paper. I'm going to drag this over. And this one, I'm going to say simulation cloth 25%, 25%. That's on that one. And this other one, I'm going to right click and say bullet soft body is hiding in different spots. Forces, I think, yeah. So, and here, see, this is what I was looking for before, is if the two-sided checkbox, but the other one didn't have two-sided. So I am going to turn on two-sided because that's relevant here. Anyway, you can now see that I've got what should be identical settings on both of those. We're in the new scene, so the gravity is identical in both of them. So let's hit play. Look at that. So here's the old one, and there's the new one. And the new one is just plummeting. And the old one is really sticking around. Now, that maybe they just refactored the strength here. So like, let's put this up to like 200%. They're not clamped. So if I put a larger value, like a way larger value, is that one going to slow down? It looks like it's still accelerating. I mean, you can see it reacting. Do you see it is doing that? So something's happening. But this one, well, like I said, a little bit goes a long way, but apparently not in the new system. So we're going to do times 10 again. Still plummeting. I mean, it twisted through the air, but this lift, like I would think that this thing would be stopping dead. Okay, well, we're in huge numbers here, and now it is reacting. So maybe just huge numbers can get us where we want to go. And now, okay, see, this is what I want. To see that this is now like wafting through the air. That's behaving like paper. But why did I have to make these huge numbers to do it? That's crazy. The other numbers were too strong. These numbers are too weak. I don't understand. All right, well, I'm going to paste those numbers in because I was getting something. Now, that lift and drag is going to be working against us when we're flinging it up. So it's entirely possible that if I was art directing this, I would keyframe these to be essentially off until they've gotten flung just a little bit in the air. And as soon as in the air, I would say, okay, now drag and lift can activate. But let's see what this does out of the box. Oh, and the wind is really flinging up. So I'm going to put that to about a third. I do want some upwardness, but not as much as the attractor, the negative attractor. You can already see those curving as they drift down. Smack. Now you see those. Like, okay, that's why I said with the drag needing to kind of like catch up on it, because immediately drag turned off and they all just gently went up into the little pile and they're coming down. I mean, they're kind of ruffling a little bit, but so how would I maybe want to go about this? Can we keyframe? Oh, we can't keyframe the objects. That would have been nice. I was going to put in some objects there and activate or deactivate them. Would have been nice. So I'm going to turn that off and just eyeball here when it's running quick. Why is that running so slow? I turned off the paper. Why is it slow? I mean, there's still one sheet, but why is this not running? I don't know why this is. I know we have a lot of frames per second here, but there's no simulation going on. Why is it still acting like all the simulation is happening? Actually, it's really bugging me. I'm going to try pulling the tag off onto something that can't run it. Let's see if that. It's faster. It's not exactly fast. Anyway, because we have to do this kind of manually, I just wanted to be able to time it. So right there, and then so right around now, I'd start keyframing up the value. So I'll just copy that and we'll set the 0, 0. Keyframe both of those. Also, we're going to, oh, I don't even have one. I was going to make a turbulence. And the turbulence, I don't know how strong we're going to go. Let's say 15, make it, yeah, actually it can be relatively tiny. So that we'll go to 15, but for now, that'll also be keyframed at 0. So I'm going to hit play, and now over this amount of frames, I'm going to transition into the drag. Boom, boom, bump, 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 bump. Okay, so let's say right around now, we're going to have the turbulence have gone up to 15. And I'm going to have this tag for some reason I had to yank off. I'll go all the way up to this insane level of drag. Drop it, reactivate, rewind, save, and let's see what happens. Now it begins getting affected relatively quickly, but it's going to ramp into that position. So that should get smacked pretty hard. And right now it's going to start getting those effects applied. Okay, yeah. So we start seeing the turbulence type stuff going on, or the drag going. I mean, it's already full strength. It ramps in quite quickly. I might want more turbulence because they're all grouping up with each other, and we need to maybe be a little more chaotic. But like right there, that pile, this pile there, that's not bad. Like in a way, I like that they're staying clustered up because they're near identical objects falling in a near identical way. So it's taking a while for like essentially the butterfly effect to make them all be more and more and more and more different. Because as they become more different, it'll be yeah. Well, anyway, you can see them reacted differently. These are just kind of like gently landing on that because still pushing them away. So yeah, that wasn't bad. I mean, they're bouncing and reacting in some slightly strange ways, but that was not bad. That is not a bad pile of paper. If I were to select both of those, we could scoot them a few frames later to let them fly higher into the air. And I'm trying to think of any ways to add extra variation. Maybe I'm going to yank that off. And turbulence, I'm going to make that be pretty small and pretty strong. It's probably too strong, but we're making it relatively high strength here, and we're making it relatively small, which kind of means it's acting upon individual pieces of paper. And I'm also going to make the paper be, it's quite bendy, but I'm going to make it twice as bendy as I just had it. And we're actually, there's friction. I'm going to get rid of the friction. We might need to keep, I think it'll be fine for that short amount of time the stack's there, but those are all technically pushing against each other, and maybe that friction stopping them from drifting apart. So that was quite a few different changes. Typically, I don't like making that many changes in one go, but anyway, let's just see what happens. But I hope you see like all the different ways I've been trying to simplify the scene and make it that this is a simple test environment for us. Like making the different sheets of paper different colors. You know, just making it a lot easier to see them do their own thing. Smack. I did delay it, and it looks like I should start the transition earlier, but those are flinging apart very nicely there. So if that transition had started earlier, and maybe a little bit of early drag, maybe it shouldn't be at 0 in the beginning, but that's a pile of papers. That's not bad. Now, I'm still frustrated because you see, like, this was going quite well, but I feel like maybe they're just caught each other. But if they're acting, yeah, right, I don't know for sure, but right there we see a little bit of intersection. We've got so many subframes. Like, at this point, how could these possibly be passing into each other? But, like, if those, yeah, see, this is now gathering up other ones. If these are traveling upward, like, no, those should not be traveling upward. So I don't know how to account for these guys intersecting. Maybe they were intersecting on the initial crash. Maybe. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know what to do about those. Let's try. Did not mean to do that. I'm going to try getting rid of that. Let's give ourselves 10 collision passes. And I just said that I probably wanted this stuff to start earlier. I kind of said, well, before I said I want to go. Yeah, they collide around there. Honestly, yeah, I just think I want that. Maybe the extra turbulence does the work for us, but I don't want. I wish we could add. What's going on here? Just a massive hiccup. I wish there's an easy way. I mean, it's so frustrating because they modified the new simulation system that the tag has to be on the cloner, where what I'd way rather do is be able to make two different types of paper and have one type of paper have slightly different settings than the other one. So it's like every other sheet of paper would have a slightly different behavior, and then potentially even blend between them. But the tags only work on the parent, so that means everything has to be given the same setting. Now, technically, we could put a vertex map on there, but I don't want to wait for all the extra calculation time for a vertex map that's got like this many points through it. Like that's quite a bit to throw at it. Anyway, I don't think we can spend much more time on this one. Well, we've kind of got an awkward amount of time, but yeah, Pete responding. But yeah, I did not think we'd have to go that high with a drag, because especially compared to the old one. The old one is like if you did anything above 10%, it might as well just stop dead. Now we're at like 22,000, and it's like, oh, I think I'm finally seeing an effect. Yeah, so that one, yeah. See, I would have loved for like half of these to be a little bit weaker, but that's a pretty good burst of paper right there. The turbulence is probably helping a lot, giving every individual sheet of paper a little bit of like drift. I haven't seen any intersect each other and start going nuts, so maybe the extra collision passes worked there. So the paper is doing a pretty good job of falling and piling up. And there's still turbulence and stuff on it, so you probably want to turn that off after a little bit, but it's actually piling up pretty nice as well. Obviously, there's a lot of variables here. So many different variables, but you can imagine that if we subdivided these papers more, we'd be getting different behaviors. If we, I don't know why it did not like the having 200 subframes. Like that just seems like a bug. And I guess, essentially we're done here. I'm going to put this back up to 100 sheets of paper. I am curious because I think they all do actually fall, but let's just see what happens. And I'm trying to think of any other. I mean, it looked pretty good to me. I'm trying to think of other things I might change. Just for no friction, I'm going to double the bendiness again because why not? I don't think the mass means anything. The damping, it doesn't really mean anything. Yeah, I don't see anything here that needs to change. Like I thought that looked pretty good. We guessed some early numbers on the attractor in the wind, but I think they're looking good. And even now it kind of passes through, but you could, again, right now we intentionally made it too big. You could shrink this down so it's just barely in the sphere. But if this is moving, if you have the right camera angles, I think it's actually doing a much better job of not colliding with the sphere in spite of the sphere not having a collision on it by doing a fall off that looks the exact same way. Why did that happen? I just was changing my view mode. Lowly stack, crash immediately. Yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah. They look so good once the drag kicks in. I mean, yeah, that's an amazing explosion of paper. The extra bend might have been a good idea. They're bending kind of nice. Got some that are kind of piled up, but in a nice way. I don't see any intersecting with each other, so I think the extra collision passes did a good job of stopping them from passing into each other. I could see maybe, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of potential art directing to do here. We could do it with one turbulence, but like they all look so smooth at the initial collision that what I'm thinking would be I'd make another turbulence, delete the keyframes. I'm just gonna have to eyeball this. Yank that off. So what I'm thinking is the tiny scale seems to work well. So they're going to get collided with. Actually, when does the sphere? It's going to run slow again, even though I took the tag off. I do not know why it still runs slow when the tag has been removed. That just seems buggy. I'm going to say don't enable. I'm curious if that changed. Yeah, see, it's even when we pulled it off, it's like it's still cached on the object because now I just turned it off and now it's like, oh, I'm going to run super fast. So that hits there. So yeah, maybe right around 48 or so. Actually, it can be the instant that that's getting there. Maybe even even like right here. So we'll keyframe our turbulence right there. This is a second one. Let's just call this turbulence mess. Actually, no, we'll call this turbulence dot setup. And that's 0 strength. And now we're going to not go too far in like that. And how strong does the other one get? Oh no, did I? Dagnabbit. I gotta undo a few times. I deleted the keyframes off of maybe the wrong one, so that's a duplicate. This will now be dot setup. Grab the tag, don't enable, drag it. We set a couple frames before, maybe like right there. That one will now be 0, and now just like 1, 2, 3 frames in, this is going to be up a crazy high value. How high did we make the other one? That was where we ended, and that one eventually goes all the way up to, nope, that doesn't work, 55. So for this one, immediately transitioning in, I'm going to say this goes up to like 300. So it's going to get 1, 2, 3. That still had the old keyframes. Whoops. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to fade those all the way back out again. So this one is essentially the collision, like the active collision, where it's like I'm introducing a bunch of chaos into the collision, and then it quickly fades out. So I'm just hoping that during the colliding that's added like a lot of chaos. And then the other turbulence is kind of doing it so they drift a little bit differently after the fact. No idea if that'll do anything for us. Running the full sim again. Oh yeah, Paul, I totally forgot that there in theory is a set initial state. See if that works. Actually, well, let's just run this through and then we'll try the initial state. Boom. Yes, no. I'm going to open up. Let's open up our timeline. Here's that one. I'd love to see these values. So those two values, oops, come on. Okay, I have to grab those manually. I can't click and drag. Those are going to go up to 2,000. We're going to way bigger. So massive, massive random hit there. And then Paul was mentioning, although all my keyframes and everything has to be offset, but we could probably do an initial state on the paper. I completely forgot about initial state. But yeah, if I had set that as initial state on the bottom, then we could have all this stuff run like 40 frames earlier, which definitely would be a way of speeding it up. I'm just not sure about it. And right now I don't want to grab all our keyframes and scoot them over. Boom. Okay. Yeah. Do you see that burst of turbulence there? Yeah, that was much better. So very quickly hitting it with a burst of like really strong turbulence, really flung these out. Now we could, you can see a lot happen there. Maybe we make it even stronger earlier and have it run for less time because this has really flung them all over the place. But anyway, you see how I'm like taking these little different pieces where we have this attractor, which is essentially acting as the collider, and then we've got this wind, which is making them fling more upward than any other way, and now we've got turbulence, which in theory is giving us like randomized drift as they start fading, as they start falling down, and now we've got what I call turbulence setup, but this is like injecting chaos for the initial collision. And each of those is, each of these is an individual art directable parameter. Like so many different things. I mean, even now I'm thinking that it's like we could give that a little bit more scale, so there's a little bit more uniformity to them. And I've still got only that one selected, and that, these two are the value. So I'm going to select both of those, scoot it closer so it happens even faster. I'm going to make it be even stronger, but I'm going to have it end earlier. And by giving it more scale, maybe part of the pile of papers will try and go left and part of the pile of papers will try and go right, less so individually and more as like a cluster. Yeah, that's a thought. I'm gonna save it as another version. We've just been overriding the main one over and over. And I don't know why, but it really felt like they went really extra high up. I wonder if that turbulence freed them. Maybe the turbulence twisted them, and the twist meant they could fly up higher even with a drag on. So maybe we don't need quite as much upward wind given the modified setup. And smack. Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, that turbulence is doing a lot. And you said, oh, wow. Wowee. Okay. Okay, I dig it. It's giving us some good information. Let's zoom on into our keyframes. I mean, these are the fun types. I'm going to drop it down to 1,000. That seemed a little too powerful. And then we definitely felt the scale of it. So I'm going to cut that scale into about half. And then it does seem to be freeing it up quite a bit. So I'm going to lower the strength of the wind so it's less likely to go flying up quite as high. What's cool is the wind is just based on fall off, so I can just change that and not worry about keyframes. I always love when I can modify something and not have to go track down the individual keyframes. That's why I like Field Driver so much, both the Rocket Lasso version and the Maxon version. Let's see. Initial stack. Okay. Ooh, nice. Oh, okay. Good initial explosion. They're still flying so far up, though. And then I think that force might be a little strong from the turbulence because you see that they're intersecting with each other. So, yeah, maybe 1,000. 1,000 is still just too strong. I mean, it is a lot. Why? It seems strange to me that I'm holding down shift and I'm trying to click the other keyframe and it's just hopping to it instead of doing it in addition. I thought we could do in addition. Oop, that's not what I wanted. Oop, and I should not be doing this while it's playing. Click and drag, which I can do. Oh, and now I grabbed seat. That's why I was trying not to do it. I got too many. Just those two. Why is that so difficult? Oh, why are they different values? I thought those were our. Ooh, I thought I dropped that to 111. Did I do the wrong keyframe? Override that one. 111. 111. But one was still up at 3,000, so that actually did not change that much. And they're still getting flung up a lot. I think the turbulence is freeing them to fling up. And the turbulence also has a power to fling up. So depending on where the center of that noise is, it might be like, generally speaking, it's like it could be in the cloud of noise being shove it down, or in the cloud of noise it could be like shove them all up. I'm trying to get it to be like a little bit everywhere. Smack. That's pretty good. Oh, okay. How quickly is oh, okay. I was going to say it feels like the drag's not happening, but it's not happening. Somehow, even maybe I still had it selected and didn't realize, and it looks like I deleted out the keyframe for the drag. So that would explain something. 22222 was the number. Rekeyframe. All right. Maybe I should not have been weakening the wind and all that because I didn't realize that the drag was turned off, and that's why they were flying so much. So everything else I said was heavily biased. Everything I said could have been true, but is now tainted by the fact that our drag was not actually activated. So maybe we need more upward. Maybe we do still need 3,000. Yeah. Well, okay. Well, the initial turbulence made that a nice burst. So we could, and even now, like, that's pretty strong. That is very strong. So let's try doing half the amount. Essentially, I just started stretching this one out. We didn't have enough time for another question, so we got a couple more minutes here. If there's any specific follow-up question, I can maybe tackle something quickly. Okay, yeah, that's a pretty nice burst there. Yeah, that's a nice crash through where they all just went flying up. Again, what we're trying to do is have this be art directable, that we could change the way these are behaving. And those are all falling. They're drifting quite slowly. But keep in mind that we're going frame. So, like, is that too much? Is it too little? I don't know. Let's get this out to the picture viewer. Same deal. Picture viewer. I don't think it's that many frames. So I don't think with the limit. Copy from viewport. Load my preset, but also turn off HUD. I don't mind the rest of it being there. It's not in the way. Oh, and key value. Control B. Outputs. All frames. Go. Revving up. Yeah. Whenever you're trying to do something with fast simulation, like this kicking through, try it with forces. Yeah, quite a nice explosion of paper. And think about why the forces are working so much better here than a kick would be, or the straight up collision of the sphere. Is I think it's actually quite logical why that would be the case. Oh, that looks really good. I don't know how well it's going to look in real time, but let's think about why the force works better. If this was just straight up colliding, then let's say the sphere is kind of hitting the bottom. So it hits the bottom sheet of paper. And now the bottom sheet of paper has to hit the second piece of paper. And the second has to hit the third has to hit the fourth. And it cascades all the way through 100 different sheets of paper. And we already saw just when it's a pile of paper, the collision, the way they all collide on top of each other. Like, this is an insane amount of forces pushing back down again. It's very resistant. But what's happening right now is we're just entering the spherical fall off. So as we enter the spherical fall off, suddenly every piece of paper is saying, oh, I want to fling upward at the same time. So the bottom one's not fighting the second one. They're both saying we both want to go up. So they all look like they're reacting at the same time. And that's the key difference between just a straight up collision and doing it with forces. Now, I could still potentially make that sphere a collider, and this is just helping it along. But even here, like given what we're seeing here, I don't feel like I do need to make that a collider because it's hidden well enough. So let's see. Pile. That's pretty good. Actually, yeah. I mean, I can see I'd tweak a few things, like a frame here, a frame there, but that is not bad. I think maybe that's not bad. Like maybe I'd have this a little, that turbulence, that kind of chaos turbulence in the beginning, maybe make that a little bit stronger right there. And then this attractor is quite strong, so I could see weakening the attractor and making the upward a little bit more. But I mean, if we want it to look like they're being flung by the direction they were hit, I mean, then moving that direction kind of makes sense to me. Yeah, I'm quite pleased with that. That is a quality explosion of paper. And yeah, they're drifting down pretty nicely. Like, obviously, we'd want to turn off this attractor and wind so that they're not like recolliding with it. This is all just a temporary thing. But yeah, I'd say that's a successful one there. I dig it. All right, any tiny little follow-up questions on that one? Because I'm quite pleased. In fact, we're even going to save that. Save as a MP4 animation. Save into episode 14 renders. We so rarely save these out. Save. Let that run through. Did I save image as 0 frame? Yeah, I think that saved all of them. It's just pretty quick. Okay, any follow-up? Excellent. Yep, Pete. Hopefully that gives you a pretty good solution there. This scene file will be available in like an hour or two if anybody wants to reverse engineer and play around with it further. Michael, save your bullet impact question for next week. And yeah, an iteration parameter. Yeah, I just don't have a good instinct, Dean, on like, again, I don't have a good instinct on the different settings here and how they interact with each other. Like end frame pass, I don't even know what that means. Extra iterations, like what extra iterations on what? Like there's passes, which to me would be iterations. So what does extra iterations mean? I don't know. We could look it up, and they did change this. There used to be even more settings here, and I think they're like, this is too many, and they simplified. But yeah, at some point I have to remember to go and look up what all 5 of those things actually mean. Because the only one I know for a super duper fact is what substeps is doing. Anyway, if anybody wants to support on Patreon, then that is always the best way of support. Actually, it's the second best way of supporting Rocket Lasso. The best way of supporting Rocket Lasso is buying some of our tools. If you liked what our mesh to spline was doing there, if you liked what the utility splines were doing there, we got to show those off a little bit. So picking up a plugin, the way I always say it is, everybody benefits from that. Like, it's a tool that we made, gives you extra superpowers, and it supports us and the work that we do. And secondarily is supporting on Patreon, where you'll get access to the scene files and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of scene files over the years, and all of the live replays all loaded up there as well, and other bonus things like discounts on the plugins, etc. But anyway, I think that is going to wrap this up. I'm trying to think of anything else, but yeah, I think that will wrap this one up. I'll see everybody again next week, and thanks everybody for the questions we got. But for now, bye-bye.